In this session, we're going to be talking about building your own HTML5 video player. How many people in here have actually played around with the video tag or just embedded a video themselves on their site? Okay, good. Looks like most people here. Cool, so that's what we're going to be talking about today and all the related elements that you need to understand in order to build your own player. My name's Steve Heffernan. Recently married, just got back from my honeymoon where we spent the whole time dodging Hurricane Rina, so happy to be here alive. I am a front-end web developer, and I have two projects right now. One is as co-founder of a company called Zencoder. We do video encoding in the cloud, and then the other project is an open source HTML5 video player called Video.js. Let's see. So this is me at 6 years old, and this is probably the best picture of me at 6 years old. A little while after this, I fell out of a hammock and killed my front two teeth, and they had to put big metal caps over my front two teeth. It was really attractive. And then I also had a lazy eye. And in order to correct the lazy eye, they had to put a patch over my good eye. And it wasn't a cool patch like a pirate patch. It was a big Band-Aid. And then I had glasses on top of that. And then I also had a speech impediment, so I couldn't say my R's. And then in order to correct that, they had to put like plastic tubes in my ears to help me say my R's. And so there was me with my metal caps, patch, glasses, speech impediment, tubes out of my ears. So HTML5 video is kind of like me at 6 years old. It has the potential to someday be a fully functioning HTML tag, but at the moment, it's got some issues, and we have to know what those are in order to work with it and build video players on top of it. So, but eventually, it will kind of be that dominant playback method, or at least I think it will be. You know, we started with multiple video technologies like RealPlayer and QuickTime that we had to support all of those at the same time in order to reach the most number of users. Then around 2004, Flash came on the scene, and basically, over time, gave us that one platform where we could deploy video once and reach almost 99% of our users, which is awesome. That's how it's been up until through today. And then you have HTML5 video, which is still new, but it's gaining enough user support that eventually is going to have the same amount of user support and potentially more user support because of the iOS devices than Flash even has today. And when you think about the next generation of web developers who today are learning HTML and JavaScript, they're not going to want to learn a whole other technology like Flash and ActionScript in order to get video on their website. So I think that's when we're going to really start to see HTML5 take over as that dominant playback technology. Now, there'll still be a number of things that HTML5 can't do, and that's where I still think Flash will be around. Flash isn't going anywhere completely. It's not going away. Especially in things like DRM. I don't see DRM, at least a full-fledged DRM, where we're talking about monitoring people's computers to see if screen capture software is running. I don't think we'll ever see that in a browser, and some websites will require that. But so for those instances, we'll still have Flash. But for a lot of the very basic, the core needs of video, I think we'll see HTML5 take over. Maybe by 2020, maybe earlier. It's hard to say, but. This is where user support is today for HTML5 video. This is a chart from March of 2011. It shows general user support at 53%. So 53% of your users come to your site can support HTML5 video. It's a couple months later now, so it's probably right now between 60 and 70%, which is great considering it's still kind of a new technology, but still not super exciting when you think about Flash and the 99% support. So if you were only to deploy video in HTML5, about a third of your users would not be able to view it. So why would you want to start working with it today? There's basically three small reasons and the one big reason. Three small reasons. First is it's the future, or at least I think so. And so now is the time to start investing in a future technology. Secondly, it runs natively in the browser. So right now with Flash, what you have is the Flash plugin application running on top of the browser. And so you have two applications running in order to get the video to play. With HTML5 video, the video playback is built directly into the browser. So there's one application. It's going to use less of your system's resources. And essentially, it's going to perform better and load faster. And obviously, like when you're talking about web page performance, that can mean a lot of things when you're talking about revenue and conversions and things like that. Still, it's a very important thing. And I've seen it myself. It can load much faster than Flash. And then finally, cleaner code. The Flash code today can get pretty bulky with the object embed code, and so if you're a web developer and you really like you really care about your code and how it looks, HTML5 video can give you something a lot more simpler, or at least that's the promise. To have this video tag where all you have to provide is a source and it'll just work, kind of like the image tag. But today, when we kind of actually work around all the different support issues, it actually ends up looking a little bit more like this, which is not quite as sexy, at least not yet. But hopefully we'll get there. And then the big reason why you'd want to start using HTML5 video today is these guys, the iOS devices. Obviously, Flash is not supported on the iOS devices. So if you look at this chart from Mepedia from February, it estimates that around 63% of video on the web can be played back through HTML5 video, which is pretty amazing. Over half the video on the web can already support HTML5 video. Just kind of shows you that Apple has basically lit a fire under HTML5 video development by requiring it on the iOS devices. If it wasn't for that, it might still be like a CSS3 feature like curved corners or something that the progressive web developers are using, but it's not really mainstream yet. But thanks to Apple, it's really being used by a significant amount of websites. So digging into the code, so it sounds like some of you are probably familiar with a lot of this, but to actually get video to play on your website, you start with the video tag with the source attribute pointing to the location of your video file, and then the controls attribute to actually show the controls over the video. Now when we start to support the different formats, so you have the open and the closed formats, WebM, OGG, and H.264 having to support all those different formats, what we need to do is actually add source tags inside of the video tag. So you drop the source attribute from the main video tag, and instead you have source tags inside with a source attribute pointing to each version of the video. And then you also have the type attribute for each of the source tags. And you can see there, like the first one is video/MP4. What that does is it tells the browser exactly what type of format that video file is. And that helps the browser to know if it can skip it or if it should try and play that. If you don't include that, the browser will have to download a portion of the video first to decide for itself if it can play that. So it's really important for speed optimization to include those type attributes and help out the browser. And then one quick note, we have to include the MP4 version first, and that's just an issue with older versions of iPad, iOS 3. Basically the iPad will not go past the first source tag. So it will try the first source, and if it can't play the first source, it will just stop, whereas other browsers will continue looking through the list for a source that it can play. So for that reason, we have to include the MP4 source. So MP4 source first, so something to make a note of. Okay, so the next step, after you support the different versions of the different HTML5 video browsers, we have all our users that don't support HTML5 video at all. And in order to support those users, what we can do is provide some sort of fallback technology like Flash or Silverlight. And the way we can do that is basically add an object tag, just like we would when embedding our own Flash player. So if you have a Flash player now, you can use the exact same object or embed code, just drop it inside of the video tag after the source tags. And then if the browser doesn't support HTML5 video, like an older version of IE, it will just ignore the video tag and source tags and load up the Flash player. All right, and then there's one more optional step that you can take, which is popular among HTML5 video players today, but definitely not required and not popular among Flash players, and that is to add a fallback image and download links. And what you're basically doing there is supporting like older Palm handhelds and things like Internet Explorer, where users don't have Flash installed or have it turned off completely. And so in this case, it will fall back to an image. So it will try HTML5, it won't be able to do that. It will try Flash, it won't be able to do that, and then it will fall back to an image. So it'll show an image like a screenshot. And then it will provide a paragraph of download links. And so that allows, basically, if the user can't play the video inside of their browser, they might be able to play it outside of the browser in another application, and then they can download it and try that. Obviously, if you care about protecting your content, this is probably the last thing you want to do, is actually add direct links to it. But if you do care about that kind of edge user on those devices, this is a step that you can take. Oh, and then one other note on the embed code is if you were wanting to actually lead with Flash. So this direction leads with HTML5. So if the user can play HTML5, it would try that first and then do Flash. But if you prefer to lead with Flash, if you have a Flash player that you've already put a lot of work into and you want to lead with that, you can basically use Swift object to check for Flash support and load up the Flash player first. Use JavaScript to write out the appropriate embed code. So either the Flash embed code or the HTML5 embed code for, say, the iOS devices where you have to have HTML5. All right, to build that last embed code, since it's kind of bulky, I threw together a quick form builder that you can just plug in your different source files, set a couple of preferences, and it will create the embed code for you. And that's at videojs.com/embed-builder. It's just something that you can use to get started if you're interested. Okay, so 3 different formats. I imagine this has already been touched on earlier today, so I'll just blaze through this. So you have the 3 formats. You have H.264, OGG, and WebM. Between those, you have open and closed formats. OGG and WebM are open, H.264 closed, meaning that if you're going to use it, you have to understand what royalties might be involved in using it. If you're displaying the video on the web for free for your users, you're not charging them anything. You should be in the clear as far as H.264 goes, but I'm not a lawyer, so make sure you understand what money you might owe MPEG-LA, the governing body, over H.264 as you're using that format. And then OGG and WebM, free and open source, and you can use them as you wish. Will we ever see peace between the formats? Sorry for the cheesy graphic. I don't see that coming anytime soon. In order to go down to one format, we would either have to have Apple integrate WebM into the iOS devices, which they don't show any interest in doing that now and really don't have any reason to. And it's also a hardware upgrade, so even if they decided to integrate WebM into the iOS devices, it would take years to actually get that upgrade out to its users. Sorry about that. And then the other way that we might go down to one format is if MPEG-LA decided to open source H.264 and make it free just like WebM and OGG. But there's a lot of patent holders in that group, and it would take a lot of agreement to do that. And I think they're making a good amount of money, so I don't think they'd be doing that anytime soon either. So I think we just kind of get used to encoding at least 2 formats for the time being. Container, so a video format, quick overview. So you have the container format, which gives us our extension, like .mp4. Then inside you have a video codec and an audio codec. And a codec is basically instructions on how to compress and decompress the video, or the video data, video and audio data. So you have the MP4 with the H.264 video codec and the AAC audio codec. And then you have the OGG format with the OGV format, the Theora video codec and Vorbis audio codec. OGG is a lower quality format than the other 2, but it's been around the longest. It was the first format used in HTML5 video. So when Opera web browser first introduced HTML5 video with the video tag, they did it through the OGG format. And so it's actually got the most support among users today because it's been around the longest. And then finally, you have the WebM format from Google, open source last year. Uses the WebM format, which is a flavor of the Matroska format, if you're familiar with that. The VP8 codec, which is from Onto Technologies, and the Vorbis audio codec, the same audio codec as OGG. So those are 3 formats. As far as user support for those, we're looking at OGG with the highest amount. This was April, so it's going to be a little different today, but OGG clearly has the highest amount with 48% user support, followed by WebM with 27%, and closely followed by H.264 with 24%. Now this is specifically for HTML5 browsers. Now if you included Flash and user support for Flash and H.264 through Flash, then obviously H.264 would be much higher in the chart. But specifically for HTML5 players, this is how likely they'll support different formats. And I think we'll see these kind of even out very quickly here, because all the newest versions of Firefox, and there seem to be a new version of Firefox every day lately, support WebM. And so as Firefox version 3 kind of gets upgraded from, we'll see WebM kind of take over the lead. Well, not actually take over the lead, but catch up to OGG. And then you also have IE9, which now supports H.264. So all those users are going to be able to support that format. And so I think we'll see a lot more evening out in the formats here in the near future. And then here's just a quick overview of kind of current user support for the HTML5 browsers. Most are going to be using Firefox, and then Chrome, Safari, Opera, and then finally IE9. And then I think as of this chart, IE9 had basically just come out, so I think we'll see a lot more users, or hopefully see a lot more users upgrading to that from older versions of IE. Okay, so quick format strategy. If you're really interested in HTML5, you want your users, as many of your users as possible, to see your HTML5 video player that you've created. You want to do all three formats, because obviously OGG supports the most, and then the other two have basically better video quality. So in that case, do all three. If you don't want to do that many formats, I would suggest going down to these two, the H.264 and WebM formats, both the higher quality formats, and both kind of catching up to OGG in the user support arena. And then finally, if you only want to do one format, you can go down to just the H.264 format. And in those cases, it would basically just be playing back in the iOS devices, Safari, IE9, and then for all the other browsers, so Firefox, Opera, and I guess not Chrome yet. Chrome has been threatening to remove H.264, but they haven't yet. So, but for all those other browsers, it would fall back to Flash. And when Flash can also support the H.264 format. So there is an option to still just do one, just you'll be bouncing back and forth between the two players. Some quick resources for encoding H.264 files. I recommend Handbrake. For OGG and WebM, you have Firefog. And then for automating the process, you can use a cloud encoding service like Zencoder, which is our project, or one of the other number of projects like Encoding.com, PandaStream, Transloaded. There's a ton of great cloud encoding providers out there to kind of help you automate the process of encoding your videos to all the different HTML5 video formats. Okay, want to touch on content protection here quickly, because I imagine that's important to a number of people here. And just up front, there is not very much support for content protection in HTML5 video, at least not at this point. And it's an open technology. It's a very open technology, both on the back end and on the front end. And so it's hard to secure at this point. So if you're using a Flash player and you're going to secure your content, you might start, your Flash player might have started with regular progressive downloads. You're just downloading the file, not streaming it. But then if you want to protect it more, you would upgrade to streaming, which makes it a lot more difficult to copy the content, difficult to feed it into a file and actually copy that file. It is possible, but it's a lot harder. And then finally, after that, if you need even more security, you might upgrade to a DRM solution like Flash Access and smooth streaming, or something like Widevine, where they're actually doing a lot of that checking of the user system to see if screen capture software is running and things like that. No matter what you do, your video will never be 100% secure. And that's, I think a lot of people understand that, but even at the highest level of DRM, where you're checking the user system, they can't know all the different screen capture software out there. There's ways to get around it. The DRM systems do a pretty good job, but yeah, as I said, there's no way to 100% secure your video, except if you had it, in a very controlled environment and you weren't broadcasting it over the web to unknown users. So HTML5 video, we don't have a lot of options there. You can basically start with some obscuring the source. So instead of like in the HTML having the source files listed out, you would instead load them through an external JavaScript file that's not easily accessible. If you're a web developer, it's pretty easy to still find those files, but that would at least kind of get around the novice web user who knows how to open up the source document and find the source on there. And then you can do some things like, I have here the time, geo, and IP limited URLs. So in cases where you know who your users are, you can basically stamp them with, like, I know this is their IP address or they accessed at this time, and limit a URL access to the video file based on those items. It doesn't protect you from those users then taking the video or finding a way to get that video and then rebroadcast it. But if you trust your users, you can at least protect the video from other people getting the file. So you just make sure that only they get the file that you want. And then I have also on here the kind of the App Store icon there, just represent iOS native apps. So just to clarify, when you're using video on an iOS app, it is not HTML5 video. So when you look at Netflix and Hulu, they've both gone the route of creating native iOS apps in order to play back the video. And those are not using HTML5 video. It's using the underlying video technology of the iPhone, which basically is the same video technology that the Safari web browser is using to make HTML5 video possible. So it's bypassing that and using the lower level video technology. And so that actually does provide a nice level of security, just that it's a native app and it's more difficult to actually see what's happening behind this native app in the iPhone. It's not as easy as the web where you can do like packet sniffers and look at the code and stuff. It's in this controlled environment, so it's harder to see what actually is happening with the video and copy it. Beyond that, kind of just default security that you have from a native app, you can do HTTP streaming, which is not really security, but it just makes it a little bit more annoying to kind of put the file back together because it's all these chunks. And then finally, you can do AES encryption, which basically ensures that the person that you want the video to go to gets the video and nobody else on the network gets that video. But yeah, so that's how, if you really want to secure your video, this is basically what Hulu and Netflix are going the DRM route on the website. So you have Netflix is using smooth streaming, Hulu is using flash access, and so Flash and Silverlight for the website, and then they both have the native apps on the iOS side. And if you have any more questions that I can help with or on that afterwards, feel free to ask me. I'm not an expert on that, but I do have some experience, and it's especially when it comes to HTML5, the whole security discussion is an interesting one. Okay, so as you're building your HTML5 video player, there's some issues that you need to keep an eye out for that you can expect to run into. First are kind of general browser cross-compatibility issues. So you have the auto buffer preload issue, and this is just kind of an example of how the HTML5 video spec for, I think it's pretty much locked down now, but was in flux. So they were continually developing the spec itself, and at one point you had the spec telling us to implement the auto buffer attribute in browsers. And then that changed, the actual functionality of that attribute changed, as did the name. And so now newer browsers actually have the preload attribute instead. So you have some older browsers that are looking for the auto buffer attribute and some newer ones that are looking for the preload, or all newer ones are looking for the preload attribute. It's becoming a smaller and smaller issue as people upgrade, but the easiest way around it is just to set both through JavaScript. Check for one, set both. The second one on here is a missing poster in some Safari versions. So some older versions of Safari, I think it was like between 3 and 4, just wouldn't show the poster at all. And then there's another just kind of discrepancy where if you preload the video, Safari will actually stop showing the poster attribute. So you have a poster attribute and you preload the video, the poster attribute will go away. Whereas in all other browsers, the poster attribute will stay there until the user actually plays the video. I think the latter is what like most of us would expect to happen. And I don't know if the Safari developers think that's an actual bug, but some kind of agreement needs to happen there. The next is cross-browser load progress tracking. So older browsers did not support the progress event. So basically, there's a progress event that the browser will trigger in JavaScript to let you know that it's receiving data from the video file. And it'll do that continuously as it's downloading the video. And so you can use that to actually build your kind of progress loading bar in your video player. Well, older browsers didn't support that. So what you actually have to do is basically it's a set interval in JavaScript that will run every, say, like a quarter of a second to check how much is actually in the video buffer. And then that's basically how you get around the lack of the progress event. And then you have the issue of HTML5 browsers not falling back on incompatible sources. And so this goes back to the strategy of going down to one format. So I said before you could go down to just the H.264 format, but that's not as easy as it might seem at first, because what happens is HTML5 browsers that support HTML5 video will never fall back to the Flash player. So if you don't provide a source that they can play, they'll just stop. They won't actually fall back to the Flash player. So if you just included one MP4 file in that source list, Firefox would hit that and would just stop. You wouldn't see any video at all. And so if you do actually want to go the one format route and not provide a format for both the open and closed browsers, you do have to do some JavaScript to actually check to see if there's a source file that the current browser supports in the list. And you can do that programmatically with JavaScript. There's a function called canPlayType. It's canPlayType, and you just feed that that type attribute into that function, and it'll tell you if the browser can play it. And at that point, if it's Firefox, in that case, you can kind of use JavaScript to remove the object embed code from inside the video tag and replace the video tag with it. So it's not super difficult to do. I can show you how to do it later if you want me to, but that's how you get around that fallback issue. iOS 3 device quirks, there are a number, and unfortunately there's still a lot of people out there that are still using iOS 3 instead of iOS 4, 5, etc. So the first is that MP4 source issue that I mentioned, that it has to be the first source in the list. And then next for iPad, if in early versions of iOS 3, if you included a poster attribute, it would actually break video playback on the iPad. So way around that is just to either not include a poster or kind of add the poster programmatically with JavaScript. And then the last one was a really weird one, in that on the iPad, if you included a JavaScript file in the head of the document, like we all do, like if you're just going to include a jQuery file in the head of your document, it could actually break playback on the iPad. If you took that JavaScript include and moved it to the bottom of the page, so right before the end body tag, video would work in the iPad, but it would break on the iPhone. And that was really confusing, and it took a while to figure that out. But basically, the only way I found to get around that is to take the MP4 source, and anytime it's an iOS device, basically force it into the video tag source. So you get the video element, and you say video element.src equals the MP4 source, and then basically force it to load the MP4. That was the only way I found around it. But again, all these things are thankfully fixed in iOS 4, so as we kind of see more users upgrade to that and iOS 5, it'll be less of an issue. So if you need something to work in the next 6 months, you'll want to worry about these things, but beyond that, I think we should be okay. Same kind of deal with Android version 2. Basically, before I was telling you that you really should include the type attribute on the source tags. Well, with Android, that would actually break video playback. And so either you would kind of rip that out with JavaScript, just basically remove it from the tag when you know it's an Android device, or do the same thing that I was saying with the iOS, where you kind of just force load the MP4 source into the video tag. And then in the earlier version, yeah, in like 2.1 on Android, you couldn't even play the video. Like you can embed the video in your web page, and then if a user pulled it up, they could click on it as much as they want. It would never play the video. So you actually had to kind of build your own play button, or just make the whole video thing, the whole video window clickable, in order, and then basically trigger the video to start playing through JavaScript. And that was the only way to play back HTML5 video on an Android. Again, this Android 2, I forget what version we're up to now, but it's much higher than 2 now. And I would say like in 6 months, we probably don't need to worry much about these issues anymore. So all these fixes I've wrapped into a library called Video.js. So you can feel free to dig through that and see how I've kind of fixed things, or ask me, and I'll point out where I've fixed different bugs, and feel free to steal what I've written in there. It's basically meant to act as a kind of like a jQuery for HTML5 video to help you get started with HTML5 video and have it be cross-compatible across all these devices and browsers from the start without running into all these different bugs. And then it also adds things like kind of custom controls and some additional features that weren't built into HTML5 yet, and still aren't built into HTML5 video yet, like a full window mode in the case where it doesn't support full screen mode. So there's 3 pieces to Video.js. You have the HTML embed code, which I showed you how to build earlier. Just use that exact same embed code. Then it's got a JavaScript library that just basically has a lot of those fixes in it, as well as some additional features. And then the CSS skin, which is just it's a player controls that look the same across all the HTML5 browsers. Because if you've noticed, when you've embedded video across the browsers, each HTML5 browser has a different skin. So this kind of allows you to have the same skin across all those different browsers. And it uses just all HTML and CSS. So it's super simple, and I'm a front-end developer, so these are technologies that I've worked with for years now. So it's a lot easier for me to design a skin in that than some other technology or some random templating language. So it's been really fun to design skins around just the same HTML. And you can see here I've designed around the same HTML just different CSS files. I have another skin that looks similar to the YouTube skin, another one that looks like the Vimeo skin, and another one that looks like the Hulu skin. This all took me about like 1 hour to 2 hours to write. I mean, I created the original HTML, so it was easy for me. But still, it's like, you know, it's CSS. You can just swap out files and have it like change the whole look of the player. Yeah, and so I thought that was really cool. And then with HTML and CSS, like you can use these advanced features, at least in the HTML5 browsers for now. Things like so I just point out, like, I'm not using any images in those skins. There's no images whatsoever. It's all HTML and CSS. So it's super lightweight. In this case, you can see like I'm using the CSS3 features, like curve corners. I've got the background gradient on there, drop shadow, and even the triangle for the play button is just a span tag with like a CSS angle hack on it to make the triangle. And so there's like no images whatsoever. It's super lightweight, loads really fast. You can, of course, you can use images, you can use SVG, you can use Canvas to create your controls. All of those are fine. I kind of like this direction. Next version will probably have some images to make it look a little bit cleaner. But for now, this loads super quickly, and I like it a lot from here. And yeah, and so when you're building your own player, you can use any of those methods to build your own controls. All right, some resources that will be really helpful as you're going through your player. This first one, Video for Everybody, is basically the first site that showed us how to appropriately fall back from HTML5 to Flash. It was a lot more complicated when this first came out a few years ago, and it was pretty revolutionary. And now it's a lot more simpler to do, but this is still an incredible resource for HTML5 video and how to use it, including there's a page on here that kind of shows like how the different browsers support what formats. Next is Dive into HTML5 by Mark Pilgrim, another just exhaustive resource for all things HTML5 video. And then I also have a set of video tutorials on lynda.com, which is a video tutorial website where I kind of actually walk through like all the JavaScript that it takes to set up like play buttons and progress trackers and load progress. And and full screen buttons and all that stuff. So if you're looking for something to kind of walk you through all of that, you can look at the videos on lynda.com. So going back to this, as I said, HTML5 video is still young even today. It's still pretty rough, but eventually, you know, it'll be kind of that fully functioning HTML tag that we can build on top of and use. So I encourage you to continue building on it, and I'm happy to help however I can as you're kind of working through it yourself. My email is steve@zencoder.com. Feel free to send me any questions, and yeah, happy to help. That is it for my presentation, and I think at this point, I know I touched on a lot of things at the surface level, but just kind of wanted to get some things out there, and then open it up to kind of dig in. So if you guys have any more specific questions, yeah, now's the time to ask.
You
Yes?
mentioned the next version of the Video.js player. What's the roadmap on that?
So yeah, hoping by the end of the year to kind of have a new version that uses images, and actually it's kind of a complete reworking of it, working with a number of the OVPs out there actually, to rework it, make it a little bit more faster. I'm actually building a custom Flash fallback for it that will also be in kind of the same licensing. So just to touch on that, like if you're using one of the open source Flash players right now, they have like you know, licensing things where you have to pay in certain cases, whatever. So anyway, there's a number of HTML5 video players out there like Video.js, and they all have very nice licensing, very like jQuery. And so so this next version of Video.js will have a Flash player that does the same. It's basically very clean licensing like that. Very fast performance, and then yeah, like I said, images, and expecting that by the end of the year. Yeah.
Quick follow-up: how extensible will you make that compared to? Because I know you're coupled with Zencoder, so which is this whole platform with API and lots of very rich and increasingly richer offerings. So is there going to be some kind of action of parity to keep them working against each other, so that the Encoding.com by default is always using Video.js because it's as a robust an offering?
So actually, Zencoder and Video.js are actually not directly connected. They're just kind of related because I work on both. But beyond that, they don't actually, like, you can't get a Video.js embed code from Zencoder. Like, they don't actually, like, it's more infrastructure. So if you're going to build a whole platform, you might use Zencoder, you might use Video.js, but you can use them independently. And actually, Vidly, well, one of the Encoding.com products, uses Video.js on the front end of their site. So yeah, so it's, you know, you can build on top of it and not have to worry about being locked into any kind of lower platform. Yeah.
Do you have any experience with text overlays or captioning within HTML5 player?
Yeah, so I've built subtitles into Video.js and another project as well. And it is doable. I've done it. It's not so easy in iOS devices. You're basically relying on Apple to kind of build in that functionality, because they don't allow you to overlay much HTML, especially on the iPhone, where, you know, on the iPhone, when you click play to play the video, it immediately goes to full screen, where you can't put any other HTML on top of that. The iPad, I did do one thing at one point where it basically goes to like full window instead of full screen. And at that point, you can add your own controls below it and add subtitles on top of it, but then you also still see like the browser URL bar. So that was the farthest I was able to get on the iPad. And so yeah, beyond that, for subtitles and captions and things like that, you're kind of limited to what Apple offers. But obviously, otherwise in browsers and stuff, you can overlay HTML5 video with anything you could want in HTML. So does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Yes.
Do you have any recommendations or experience with ad serving, like pre-roll, post-roll, those types of things?
Yeah, for HTML5, I know there's another number of sites that have started doing that, and unfortunately, I can't name a ton off the top of my head. I know there's one group called Brainient, I believe, that does, I don't know if it's pre-roll and post-roll, but it has to do with like advertising on top of HTML5 video. And I think if you just search for HTML5 ad serving, you'll see things like, I think Brightcove's doing some of it. Tremor Media, I think, was doing some of it. So yeah, that's the most I know. But I know there's options out there. Yeah. there.
Do you know if HTML5 has any built-in like chapter features which allow you to jump to certain parts of the video?
No, there's nothing built in yet. You know, they're bouncing around the idea of that concept. Today, like features like that, you can potentially build yourself in JavaScript, because it's just a matter of kind of reading some kind of playlist that you could create yourself, and then creating buttons that allow you to jump between the different and set times, basically. But at this point, there isn't. I don't know of a browser yet that supports kind of bouncing around in chapters, and then obviously once they decide to support that, it will take some time for all the browsers to support it. But yeah, I mean, I would encourage you to, if you need something like that, feel free to hack at it in JavaScript, because I don't think it would be super difficult. Right there.
What about live video kind of thing?
For live video, yeah, I'm not super familiar with live video in HTML5 myself, but I've been to a couple conferences where there's the guys from FluMotion. They did livetranscoding.com too. They would be the one to look into livetranscoding.com. They actually have some technology that allows you to do live through HTML5, and I don't know if it's. I don't know specifically how they're making that happen. If it's through a file that just has kind of no end, or if it's actually some kind of streaming protocol. But at this point, I don't believe there's any like actual streaming protocol that HTML5 supports. Like it doesn't support RTMP of Flash or RTSP or any of that, and I think only Safari supports the HTTP adaptive streaming. So I believe they're doing something with HTML5 video streaming. I'm just not sure exactly how they're doing it. So, yeah. You had a question here.
I may be contacting as well. This summer I was working on a project and was living on most of the sites that you were
Oh, yeah.
referencing.
Yeah.
I ended up pulling out my hair really of all things on IE9.
Hmm.
It was the only one that I could not get the HTTP profile to work on. So I ended up having to kind of have a note on the page recommending IE8 compatibility mode just to get the hash callback.
Huh.
And it was just driving me crazy. I was using pretty much every encoding tool possible to try to get the HTTP profile to work. I was just wondering if you know of any, are you aware of any issues in IE9 that might prevent HTTP profile from working?
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I mean, I guess there's a lot of things that actually could limit a file from playing, like from the H.264 profile to B-frames and all these random things. But I don't know of anything specific that would cause it to break in IE9. But yeah, if you want to email me, I have some very smart encoding people working for us at Encoding at Zencoder, so you can push it to them and see if they have any advice. Yeah.
It was really funny because ironically I was able to fall back all the way to 96.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there were a number of issues with IE9 when it first came out, at least the preview version as far as HTML5 video. But they've cleaned it up a lot, and it's turning into a very nice browser. So, yeah. Yes.
How do you get the pseudo streaming working with Fluid?
Pseudo streaming, like adaptive streaming, like chunking it, or.
Well, just I don't know, PHP pseudo streaming. That's got to be the Flash fallback page now. The player you recommend on there.
Oh, Flow Player.
Flow player.
Yeah.
The pseudo streaming player when it actually seems to progressively down no matter what.
So let's see. Are you talking?
It's supposed to use PHP to chunk out and parse the file, but it's still progressively down.
Oh, instead of actually chunking out. So the server is trying to chunk the file, and then the player can't handle it. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to kind of look at your use case a little bit closer. Nothing comes to the top of my head that. Send me an email, Steve@Zencoder, and yeah, I can dig into it a little bit more and see what's going on there. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Do I need to get out of here? I do. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, again, feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions, and have a good rest of the conference.